Hey, progress on Bladewarden is good. It has now officially been over a year since development started, and this is actually the 10th devlog. Of course, there's still plenty of engine things that will need tackling at some point, like the save, load system and audio, but we're getting somewhere, and a lot of the work is to do with game design now, not just engine stuff. There have been some changes to the plan I made in the last devlog, which was a bit of a stretch anyway, if we're being honest. Of the things on the list, I have now successfully added some faction ownership to the hex data in the GUI. I have also allowed players to create new settlements. I have added a new faction-wide resource panel to the top left of the GUI, and I've added a fog of war, both to hide the map until it is explored, and also then to not show units in previously explored hexes unless they're currently seen by the faction. This leaves two things still on the list I haven't done: the events console log and the minimap. The thing is, I kind of had a mini crisis when starting to work on these about exactly what direction I should take Bladewarden in. So I did something I probably should have done months ago. I actually sat down and wrote a game design doc, at least the starter one, to try and get all my thoughts in order about this and to prioritise a few of the features. Like, I tried to answer what sort of events a player would be interested in and what sort of events there will be in general. But this then got me thinking about whether a console really is the best way to display that information. Like, if someone is declaring war on you, surely they should be a bit more visible than just a log entry. Similarly, with the minimap, it is a lot of work to implement, but I wasn't actually 100% sure I needed it right now. And worse, if I changed what terrain the game has or other things with the map rendering at any point in the future, like adding big things like the fog of war, I would basically have to redo it all again anyway, so priority-wise it might actually be better leaving it till later, like the save and load system. So in the end, I decided I wanted Bladewarden to focus more on the nation building aspect, on building construction, settlement upgrades, resource collecting, and most of all, bigger, more complex events. The thing is, I know dealing with events and providing players meaningful decisions works well as a gameplay loop because it's basically what Crusader Kings relies on, as well as Warsim. And I wanted to make the world map to be more of a reflection of a player's progress and decisions rather than like the be-all and end-all of everything. To that end, I've added a new event system, which allows me to chain multiple events in a row based on a player's decision, with events having complex start triggers, which means I can have them happen at times and situations that make sense. I've only created 2 test event types so far, but I'll be adding many more of these per development cycle, as they're going to be crucial to the core gameplay loop of balancing available resources. Speaking of balancing resources, you may notice that I've added 2 resource types not quite like the others: faith and fear. This feeds in again to the new gameplay loop, rather than you being some mortal ruler, like in Crusader Kings. I think you being a deity or god is a much better fit for the game, as it allows us to expand the timeline of the game much further, so you can play for centuries and oversee technology changes and need to react to worldwide cataclysms, rather than worrying about dying within like 60 years. So circling back, I still plan on adding a minimap and events console at a later date, but I feel consolidating the direction of gameplay was actually a real win here. The other big change, which I mentioned earlier, is adding fog of war for all factions. This is much more work than I originally anticipated, since it is really 2 separate features. One tracking which locations have ever been seen by a faction, and the other tracking which locations are currently visible based on the site radius of units and faction borders. I'm super happy with how this looks though. I'm sure I'll be tweaking the actual cloud asset as time goes on, but this one big addition makes it feel less like a simulator and much more like a game. It also obviously adds a lot of gameplay tension, since you're unable to see the full world, so you can't tell where enemy factions are or what they're doing. And similarly, enemy NPC factions will also not be able to see everything, which should make things more interesting. Other minor, less visible changes are how military units are able to capture land for their factions and also extend their borders, how the GUI is now a bit brighter, the water hex is a bit darker. I've also added the create settlement button for testing, added in a deity name input, changed how the player faction is generated, changed how city outskirts are generated, and a bunch of refactoring throughout the code. The code in general is now in a decent place, although I think there's definitely some speed games to be had. The fog of war visibility code may have a memory hogging problem, which I'll look into at some point. Onto the to-dos for the next cycle. So the main priorities this time around is adding things to spend resources on, so we can get a bit closer to the completed game loop. I would like to add new construction types. Constructions are one per location, like settlements, such as being able to build farms, temples and trading posts. Each of these will be represented on the map with their own hex like the settlement is. I then plan to add upgrades to constructions. These are non-visible changes to the things a construction can do, or does each turn, like adding level 2 fields to farms to increase the amount of food it produces, or a level 1 scriptorium to a temple. Big thing I want to do as part of these additions is redesigning the bottom part of the GUI. Probably add a permanent bar here instead of the current pop-up selection menu that shows hex and unit details, as well as the new construction and upgrade details. At the moment, the current GUI just doesn't have the ability to list off the upgrades or any of the buttons we'll really need, so it does need some thought. The new Fog of War system is great, but when I'm actually testing the game I need to be able to see everything, so I think I'll actually be adding a cheat console in for development, and then some cheats. As part of the event system, I've realised I need to form faction-wide modifiers or status effects, things like minus 20% food production due to a famine. The status effects may even be triggers in themselves for other events, as well as NPC faction behaviour, and I will also need to add a place to display them. I'm thinking at the top of the GUI, although we might also have a faction screen at some point. And of course, finally, I would like to add more event types, even if just to test the new faction-wide modifiers. Please do let me know if you have any fun ideas for one-off events or event chains. I'm definitely open to suggestions here. I could add pretty much anything. And that's about it for the to-dos. We have officially survived 1 year without going completely insane or bankrupt, which is awesome. The goal for the next anniversary is at least to have a working prototype done so I could begin iterating on the gameplay loop and thinking about early access. There's still so much to do though, but we're getting closer every day. Take care everyone, and thanks for being along for the ride.